Hi folks and welcome back to Our Sci-Fi. As you know, science fiction is full of novels, short stories, films and much else besides, with tales about some kind of scourge spreading among people and destroying the delicate balance that holds our society together. In many of these tales, the disease alters the appearance and behavior of human beings, turning them into bloodthirsty beasts, making the overall situation even worse and ultimately causing the inevitable chaos that leads to the collapse of civilization. The Last of Us, an action video game developed by Naughty Dog, belongs to this type of genre. It has won various prizes and is sometimes considered the all-time best among games. Given the imminent release of a sequel and the great debate about pandemics these days, I naturally decided to make a video about science fiction that explores the scientific aspects of The Last of Us. The game's plot unfolds in the United States, where an epidemic caused by a parasitic fungus that had previously infected some crops throws society into complete chaos. To tell the truth, it's not entirely the fungus's fault, as most of the devastation is generated by the carpet bombing raids that the US Army carries out on the cities in a desperate attempt to contain the disease. So 20 years after the start of this crisis, we find ourselves in the midst of the usual post-apocalyptic mess, examples of which we have met thousands of times in science fiction literature, with martial law, quarantine areas manned by the army, and small groups of smugglers and rebels who try to subvert the system or simply survive as best they can. It would also be nice to make a video about why this kind of setting is so widely used in science fiction, and maybe I will get around to doing this, so please subscribe to the channel so that when I do, you'll be informed. In The Last of Us, the fungus is simply called Cordyceps, but as many of you may already know, the genus Cordyceps really exists and is in fact a parasitic fungus belonging to the Ascomycetes class. Naughty Dog was actually inspired in the development of the video game's plot by the mechanism of action that this type of fungus deploys. Popularized by the BBC Planet Earth documentary, see the link in the description below, this parasitic fungus belongs to the Cordyceps genus. However, there is also a similar genus called Ophiocordyceps. Both Cordyceps and Ophiocordyceps attack several insect species. The BBC documentary mainly talks about the bullet ant, Paraponera clavata, which in nature can be infected by several species of parasitic fungi, including Cordyceps thojana, Ophiocordyceps australis, and Ophiocordyceps ponebrinarium. Once the ant is infected, the fungus manages to alter its behavior, thereby generating a zombie ant, which it manipulates for its own purposes. This occurs through the production by the fungus of alkaloid substances that drive the ant to climb to a higher place where it will die and where the fungus will have a greater chance of spreading its spores, once the insect exoskeleton has been perforated. Another very similar and well-known example found in nature is Leucochloridium paradoxum, a flatworm that infests snails, turning them, as it were, into zombie snails. The worms grow in the snail's body and go up the ocular antennae, inflating them and making sure that the snail is pushed toward the light and therefore out into the open. The worms produce a pulsating movement in their colored bands that imitate the appearance of a caterpillar or an earthworm. These are visible through the snail's transparent antennae and attract birds, which eat the snail, and with it the parasites which lay their eggs in the bird's intestinal tract. The eggs are then expelled through the feces and subsequently eaten by another snail that will come into contact with them, thus restarting the cycle. The idea of organisms that modify the behavior of other organisms to their own advantage is a widely used concept in science fiction. Think about The Happening, the film where plants begin to produce chemicals that inhibit man's self-preservation instinct, triggering mass suicides. It is true that the film was a teeny bit lousy and the concept is somewhat far-fetched, but in fact plants are really able to alter the behavior of other organisms through the emission of special chemical compounds, though this generally only affects insects. Then there are all the zombie movies, where people transform and tend to bite the uninfected and thus transmitting the virus to them. Zombies were originally devised as bedeviled humans in horror films, but were subsequently transmuted into virus-infected entities in science fiction, in keeping with today's cultural outlook. And here too nature instructs. The rabies virus, which causes aggression and abundant salivation in the infected body, promotes further biting and transmission. This mechanism is also present in The Last of Us, with the infected attacking and their bites spreading the infection. Occasionally, they hide in dark and humid places, where they die, allowing the fungus to bear fruit and spread its spores. It is unclear what physiological mechanism allows cordyceps in The Last of Us to alter the behavior of the infected, but this might very well depend on some psychotropic alkaloid substance produced by the fungus. And here too, there are examples in real life that are surprisingly relevant to what happens in The Last of Us, such as the parasitic fungus called Claviceps purpurea, but more commonly known as ergot. As in The Last of Us, ergot infects cereals, especially those cultivated by man. The fruiting bodies of this fungus grow on rye and to a lesser extent on other species of grain, and are full of poisonous and psychotropic substances, including lysergic acid, famous for its use in the synthesis of LSD. Food contaminated with this fungus has caused real epidemics of madness and other sometimes lethal symptoms that no one, especially in ancient times, could explain. These mysterious events were sometimes identified as demonic causes or the like, and those affected were feared and turned away. The most common symptoms, in addition to altered mental status and hallucinations, were convulsions and gangrene. But at least ergot poisoning wasn't contagious. Today, strict controls are carried out in agriculture to prevent contaminated species of grain from ending up on our tables, but poisoning to the detriment of farm animals is still frequent as forage is less controlled. In short, The Last of Us is a good example of science fiction inspired by reality, and even if it does not go very deeply into the issue of biological speculation, it does a fair job as regards proposing circumstances that society may come up against during such difficult times. With the military trying to stem the infection by imposing martial law, and the classic rebel groups who do not intend to submit to the new dictatorship, the game is very reminiscent of the circumstances described in the catastrophic novels of English science fiction. Watch my video on pandemics in science fiction for some examples. The link is given below in the description. What I want to know from you, however, is whether you have played The Last of Us, and if so, whether you liked it, and whether you intend to buy the sequel. Please write your comments in the comment section below, and by the way, please click the thumbs up button for this video. See you in my Facebook group. Until next time, and the next video, it's bye for now.